Good. Oh, if the people are here, um, Sabrina, Michael, would either of you guys like to start? Would either of you guys like to give I guess I have the decision, so I'm gonna say the decision, and then if Sabrina or Michael want to say something, they're welcome to go first. This was a 3-0 decision for side opposition, Canyon Crest. And yeah, Michael, Sabrina, if you
Um, yeah, I thought this was a really strong debate. At times, I felt that there was more time being spent arguing the whole camera and climate change thing. As a judge, I am not gonna judge you if your camera's off or not. Like, I generally don't care. It's like in person, we're not supposed to judge you if you have like sneakers or like unprofessional clothing. So for me, like that really didn't sway my decision anyway, and it wouldn't have. So I felt like there was a lot of time being spent arguing that, especially in the last like 2 rounds. I felt that instead of spending the time arguing on the whole climate change camera thing, there could have been more time dedicated to extend arguments. As a judge, if you say extend my argument, but you like mentioned it like twice in the beginning, that's not gonna work for me, you know? If you're gonna want to extend the argument, just make the argument again, right? Give me like a little pointer of, hey, this was my argument. This is why you guys should vote for me. But just saying, judge, extend my argument from, 50 years ago or whatever, it's not really going to do it for me. So I just felt like for opposition, your guys' last speech was the strongest, and that's why I ended up voting for you guys.
Michael, would you like to go next, or should I?
I can go. On the theory, I mean, David stopped you guys to tell you to read paradigms. I guess maybe the other two judges said they like really hate theory in the paradigm. I don't. I think theory is great. I ran theory. Um, the theory shell was fine. I mean, it was very stereotypical. I mean, it had all the parts you needed. And I would have been perfectly willing to vote for the theory. Um, because I mean, there's precedent for voting on stuff done even in person outside of the round for whatever reason, for whatever impact. And I would have been 100% happy to vote just for the dropped prefer counter interp over reasonability. If I didn't think that affirmation didn't do a good enough job, like just eking over the line there of dealing with the nitty gritty, like reduced impact. If affirmation threw in a line about how you should vote for us because even reducing carbon emissions by a little bit will have X impact, I would have voted for them. But negation comes back and says, if affirmation's only impact on the theory is collapsive debate because we all die, and then negation tells me we're going to all die whether or not we have the camera on because climate change is still happening, then affirmation loses their impact and the theory kind of collapses. If affirmation talked about counter interp in the rebuttal speech, I would have been a lot more likely to buy that, but it kind of just disappeared and floated until the very last speech, so I wasn't going to vote on that. Just really quickly on the contentions from affirmation. I agree with negation really strongly that your links in the first contention do not match with the impact. I don't buy that Colombia's bad economic situation is because of Pablo Escobar being, I don't think narcos caused any significant loss in Colombian GDP. And even if it did, affirmation comes back with, Colombia's actually doing pretty good. So I was not paying attention to whatever affirmation was saying on one by the last speech. The second contention was the stronger contention. I think affirmation struggled a lot because, the impacts you give on bad mental health just do not line up at all with the links you were giving about just the general immorality of killing. Negation didn't point this out, explicitly, but I think they did enough by saying, I don't know. Why did I vote for negation? I voted for negation because of the idea that victims are rewriting their own narratives through, popular conceptions of Pablo Escobar. And the reasoning that maybe I filled in a little bit for the negation was just that, more people will see people rewriting their own stories and the education will go farther if we memorialize Pablo Escobar, which was enough for me to vote negation. I think negation should have been a little bit cautious because I feel like that was just it hinges on the idea that we must memorialize Pablo Escobar in order to do any of this education and any of this rewriting the stories, which I don't think is inherently true, but affirmation just never points that out. So that's all I needed to do that's all I needed to vote negation. I do agree that negation's last speech was the strongest speech in the round. I think you did really good there. Also a note for negation is I judged you guys last round and I was like, oh, you guys were really messy, but you guys were really clean here. You really clutched up this round. It was a very clean round. Also, funniest line I've heard in the tournament was said in the very first speech, which is that judge killing impacts out to death, which is so true, and I really love that. I wrote that down. I'm going to remember that. Otherwise, good round, guys.
Okay. I'm a little bit more of a yapper than I think both Sabrina and Michael. So if you guys want to cut me off at any time, please let me know. And if Michael and Sabrina have anything that like disagree with anything I'm saying, please let me know because I could be wrong. Judges are just people. Okay, so let me start off by refuting Michael. I'm not a theory and critique hater outright. I think that kind of debate can be really fun if made accessible. And from the get-go, I think I don't know if I'm allowed to say the word pissed off, but what made me mad was that I called slow twice, and negation called slow once, and y'all didn't slow down. So from the get-go, I'm already like, okay, why is affirmation making this critique? Right? You guys called it a theory shell. Okay, getting into the technicality of it, I viewed of it as a critique. Um, but in general, I think critique arguments can be really fun and they can be really creative and really interesting and they can be really fun when both sides are actually engaging with the critique. Um, and it seemed to me that a the argument was not made with a lot of clarity. So when I evaluate a critique, I'm thinking, the whole reason of evaluating a critique is like, okay, there's this extra thing in this round, that's actually more relevant than the debate itself, right? And this extra thing is we're going to cause climate change and we're going to kill everyone, right? And for me to even start evaluating a critique, I have to think, okay, are you doing a clear and convincing job of actually convincing your opponents to turn off their camera and to do their part in stopping climate change? Because that's what you say the whole point is. You say the whole point is let's educate everyone to not use their cameras and to like work towards solving climate change. But you're not actually trying to get your point across in a clear and well understood manner. So from the get-go, the intent of the critique, I'm already kind of skeptical of. Um, that being said, I think negation side opposition did not do that great of a job responding to the critique. I think you guys talk a lot about scope. And I think in general, the whole point of a critique is, oh, we're doing these things, but like side government or side oppositions do them a little bit more. So they're much worse. And so they should lose. But I think you guys were right that like, oh, like side aff, like side government. So I use aff and gov interchangeably, but affirmation, um, is also using their computers and they're also on the Zoom tournament. So they're also hurting the environment. I think, to be honest, your most effective response to the critique could have literally just been to turn your cameras off. Like you guys literally could have just clicked camera off, and then I would have been like, okay, what are they complaining about? I think Michael and I might have not been that convinced by the critique because we didn't even turn our cameras off. Oops. Um, and like maybe we would have if we were really convinced. Um, I think another thing that I mean, you guys engage with like the logical reasoning of the critique, but you guys didn't engage a lot with the structure. They read like competing interp over reasonability, which the reason I told you guys to be my paradigm is that I'm not tabula rasa. And like what I guess what that means is just reading competing interp doesn't mean I believe you. Like if you say, oh, interp over reasonability, I'm like, okay, why? And you never really tell me. And I'm not like Michael. I don't just like believe your competing interp over reasonability, even though I know that it's a standard thing to include in like a critique shell. Another thing that I think would have been beneficial for the negation is, are you guys familiar with speed theory? Okay, so there are YouTube videos on it, but in general, if your opponents are talking really fast and using highly technical terms that you maybe don't fully understand, you can say, hey, they were talking really fast and not making the debate inclusive, and they should be dropped because they're literally just running this critique to be mean. and to be exclusionary. Is like the general idea of a speed date show. So it is pretty useful to know if you guys ever encounter an opponent who is talking very fast, not willing to slow down, and yeah, is being confusing. I will say the last thing about this K show is what Sabrina mentioned. As a judge, like I am technically not supposed to judge you on whether or not you have your cameras on or off. Like in the MPDL rules, like I'm like literally not allowed to have it like influence my decision in any way, shape, or form. Whether or not debaters have their camera on or off is a personal choice that should not at all impact the outcome of the debate. And the critic could have maybe addressed this point in their critique. They could have said, "Oh, MPDL rules are unfair," whatever, but they didn't. And so again, I'm kind of like, do I choose this critique or do I choose the rules? And they didn't give me a reason not to choose the rules, so I choose the rules. Okay. Now, why did I actually vote on side opposition for the actual case? I think, as Michael mentioned, both sides, impact-wise, were kind of hard to follow. It seemed to me that there was not a clear distinction between impact caused by Pablo Escobar and impact caused by the memorialization of Pablo Escobar. They're two different things, right? AF talks a big game. They're like, killing is killing. He killed 4,000 people. That's a bad thing. But, whether or not you memorialize Pablo Escobar doesn't change the fact that he killed 4,000 people. Like, okay, he killed 4,000 people. So again, so as Michael said, you need like better impact as opposed to like, oh, impacting mental health. Because there is a real moral argument to hating on people who killed people, right? You don't want to be like, you don't want to memorialize Hitler because like he petted a cat one time and it was cute because he like fed a cat a treat, right? So I think there is a really good moral argument to why you shouldn't memorialize bad people who kill people, period. And but I think negation does a pretty good job of actually responding to the moral argument, which is that, you know, war is messy and like conflicts are messy. And like George Washington, he killed a bunch of people and we memorialize George Washington. What's the distinction? And affirmation goes, oh, like, George Washington was trying to liberate the United States. And Pablo Escobar was like killing in bad blood, which the distinction is not really real to me. Like, do families of like the British soldiers care whether or not like George Washington killed them because he was liberating? No, they're just like, oh, like this dude killed my son. Right? At the end of the day, like the impact of killing is death. Oh, like, why is death any different depending on intention? I don't really know. No one really tells me. And if death is death and we memorialize people who kill people all the time, you know, I have a hard time believing this affirmation argument that it's a bad idea to memorialize killing people. Even though, like, I think, like, yeah, I don't think we should be hyping up mass murderers. But, if we're comparing them, why is one okay and one not? I'm not really given a reasoning as to why. Um, okay, so I voted for side opposition. Again, kind of under this idea that these documentaries, like Narcos, whatever, um, are actually memorializing not just Pablo Escobar, but also giving a platform to victims. Um, I guess I can't see if everyone raises their hand, but have people actually seen the show Narcos? Okay, not super relevant in this round, but if you actually watch the show Narcos, like it's pretty brutal. Like it's like you're not like, oh, like so okay. Opposition comes up here and they're like, okay, yeah, like no one watches Narcos and is like, oh yeah, like this is lit. Like killing people all the time, this is the best thing ever. I want to do this. And I kind of agree because having seen the show and also like just generally like shows about like criminal organizations, like they're bloody, they're gory, they're not very fun. And also the other thing with Narcos is they actually explicitly talk about victims in the show. Like maybe again, you guys haven't really seen the show, but they explicitly are like, look, this is the horrible thing Pablo Escobar did. These are the families that are talking about it. So I think this idea that families and victims are given a platform, like I disagree with. I think A, it's true that they, maybe what's a good, have you guys seen the show like Painkiller? It's on Netflix. It's about like the opioid crisis. Okay, never mind. Never mind. Not relevant. Not relevant. But anyway, um, so that's why I ended up voting side opposition. Some general things that I have about um the round in general is, I actually okay. I'm gonna touch on the critique one more time because it did piss me off. Um, M MG, so member of government, spent 3.5 minutes of their speech on the critique. And 3.5 minutes, okay, if you're spending 3.5 minutes on an argument, you better win the argument. Like maybe this is a hot take, but if you're spending like a third of your speech on an argument and you're not like super clearly winning that argument and you're not like listing it out point by point, I'm like, where did those 3.5 minutes go? Like, what are we doing? Um, I think in general, the other key issue I have with this critique as a whole is that there are so many factors to computer energy output that are not camera usage. For example, Arav, do you use a PC or do you use a laptop?
Mm, I use like a laptop, yeah.
Okay. Does a laptop use more or less energy than a PC, for example? Do you know?
I'm assuming less.
Okay. Is your partner using a laptop or a PC?
Uh, I think he's using a laptop too.
Use a laptop.
Okay. In general, the point I'm trying to make, it would have been cool if you guys were actually using PCs. Or maybe you are using PCs and you're just not admitting it. I don't know. But in general, the point I'm trying to make is there are so many different factors that lead to energy output. And when you say we're doing our best to mitigate energy out, like to mitigate the amount of energy we're consuming, it's like, okay, like buy the most energy efficient computer. Like turn off all, like, make sure you've closed all your tabs. Like it's all this type of thing that leads to just computer energy output where I have a hard time believing that you're actually doing the best. You're doing your best job possible to mitigate um your computer energy level. But anyway, um okay, some points that like specifically I just think are a little bit like on the trade thing. This is like the last big thing of the round. On the trade thing, you guys talked about how like Pablo Escobar's image impacted trade with Colombia. Okay, so let's talk about this. Affirmation says that after 9/11, the US stopped trading with Middle Eastern countries. This is just not true. Like, flat out, like it's not like after 9/11, the US was like, no trade with any Middle Eastern country ever. That's just not what happened. Was there like we invaded Iraq and Syria? We probably weren't trading a lot with them. But we were doing trade with the UAE. We were trading with Egypt. We were trading, we were trading with Saudi Arabia. We didn't just stop trade. So this is not really true. I think in general, also, other issue with this example, as opposition pointed out, is it's not relevant. You know, Pablo Escobar, you know, did his thing in Colombia, was horrible in Colombia. You know, I don't really see why that's 9/11 comparable. Um, I think another thing is trade has a bunch of different factors, right? I think it's really hard to say, oh, Pablo Escobar ruined trade for Colombia, period. You know, there are so many things that led to Colombia's economy not being as ideal as it could have been. Um, some would say it was US involvement and CIA coups. Whether or not that is true, it's beside the point, and I'm rambling. But anyway, I think you have to do a much better job of tying in this idea of Pablo Escobar into how it harmed trade and how it harmed Colombia's economy. Um, Last on this idea of economy and trade, Ned could have turned this argument. If people love the show Narcos and it's like one of the most famous shows on Netflix, Loki, it might boost Colombian tourism. People might watch Narcos and think, oh shit, maybe we should go oh, sorry, this is recorded. People might watch Narcos and be like, oh crap, like this is cool. Like we want to go to Colombia. Like, you know, there's a beautiful beach in this Narcos episode. We should check out that beautiful beach. Who knows? Anyway, Ned could have turned this argument. I might have thought like this would be funny. Um, yeah, I guess in general, takeaways from this round are if you're making a theory argument, at least pretend to try to be accessible. Like at least slow down when people are asking you to slow down. Um, and yeah, that's kind of the big takeaway. If you guys have any questions for me or if any of the judges disagree about the yappage.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.